Fuck. Okay, I just got my Uber Eats, but here's Inlang in less than 100 seconds. So Inlang is two things. First, it's developer-first localization infrastructure. And second, Inlang is also a test case of bringing software engineering collaboration and automation to people outside of software engineering, starting with translators, but we hopefully end up at enabling thousands of artists to create a song together. And artists are, mechanical engineers, video producers, anyone. And I think it seems like version control is the enabling factor. Now you might be wondering, what's the connection between localization infrastructure and this? And the connection is this. Inlang is built entirely on Git, the version control system that powers all the unprecedented automation and collaboration we see in software engineering. Like, 10,000s of developers can write software together. What if 1,000 artists could create a song together, right? But, how do we actually achieve that, right? How do we make localization easier, and how do we bring those software engineering workflows to people outside of software engineering? And we're doing that by pulling translators. So this is Git, okay? This is Git. These are developers, and these are translators. And usually you have kind of sequential, we call it sequential handoffs, which means a developer is done, and then the kind of a file or something gets sent to a translator. Hey, can you please translate it? And the translator is done, and then customer support gets like 10,000 tickets because the translations are broken and the user interface is screwed up. And what we're doing now is, we're pulling the translators into the Git repository, and by doing so, we enable something we call parallel collaboration. Developers and translators are able to collaborate in parallel on the same source of truth, namely the Git repository. Let me show it in action to you. So we have the Inlang editor. That's kind of the front end and interface that translators work on, which just takes a regular Git repository like this one. There we go. A regular Git repository. I just take the link. There we go. github.com/inlang example. And I, as a translator, I can now directly contribute to this repository. Oh, there we go. To this repository, even though I'm not technical. So let's add the French translation here, machine translate. Let's commit this and push it. And what we'll see is that I, as a developer, if I were to be a developer, I'm in my user interface, namely the IDE, and I just do my usual flow, and boom, et voila, we get the commit for the French translation, and that's the parallel collaboration that we mean. Translators are working in their interface, developers are working in their interface, and yet they're all collaborating in parallel on the same source of truth, the Git repository. And because of that version control, we can automate everything. So if I refresh here, we should see that a GitHub action just ran that checked whether the translations are valid. And they are valid because it succeeded. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're letting translators directly contribute to, or we're pulling them into Git repositories. And by doing so, we're enabling that parallel collaboration. We're enabling all the automation because you as software engineers, you have control over the data. You can just automate everything. And developers and translators, I think that's the biggest thing. They can work, you can work in the same branch. If you have a staging environment, translators can directly contribute to the staging environment without waiting for it to be in production and then doing the kind of sequential handoff thing, right? Now, what's next? What's next is that we're going to build a lot of dev tools that streamlines the work of developers, but also, if we enable parallel collaboration for translators and developers, and we bring unprecedented automation to localization, this parallel collaboration and single source of truth between different departments most likely also makes sense for designers. So these are designers now, they have the same problem, right? A designer is done and then sends the design file to the developer, and the developer gets started, and then something doesn't work and it all begins again. What if, someone brings in designers into that Git sources truth and enables parallel collaboration now even between all those groups that are working with it. What if, like the Figma file is in the Git repository, and because it has version control, we get all the collaboration that we love from Figma compared to Sketch, but also developers now have all the power to just automate the entire handoff, so no handoff anymore. If a color changes in the Figma file, it can be automatically reflected in the code, and we just shorten all the kind of feedback cycles that happen. If the designer starts the mock, the translator can immediately say, hey, listen, what you're doing there, this won't work for the Chinese translation, for example, and blah, blah, blah. So this is what we're doing, and long story short, we might end up there, What if thousands of artists are able to create a song together? And it seems like version control is the enabling factor. And this was one take, and I really hope it's good.